The real problem becomes when you have broad commercial availability of quantum computing, but not broad enough that all of us can use it in our wallets. And there's that interim period that's a bit awkward. And during that interim period, Bitcoin needs to change its algorithms. We can migrate quite easily to another algorithm. It's not really as big a threat as people think it is. Does quantum computing mean that at some point all lost coins could be reclaimed because they can't be moved to an upgraded address? JJ, yes, that is the case. Quantum computing would basically mean that the elliptic curve digital signature algorithm would be vulnerable. Now, there are two different categories of algorithms that are used within Bitcoin. One is a hashing algorithm, SHA-256, and the other one is a digital signature algorithm, ECDSA, elliptic curve.
Here's a simple explanation of ECDSA and SHA-256 in Bitcoin. SHA-256, Secure Hash Algorithm 256-bit. What it is, a cryptographic hash function. What it does in Bitcoin converts any input, like a transaction or a public key, into a fixed 256-bit, 64-character string. Even a tiny change in input creates a completely different hash. Why it matters. Used to create Bitcoin addresses, used to secure transactions by making them tamper-proof. Example, if Alice sends 1 BTC to Bob, the transaction data is hashed with SHA-256. This creates a unique fingerprint of the transaction. ECDSA, elliptic curve digital signature algorithm. What it is, a method for signing messages using elliptic curve cryptography. What it does in Bitcoin, allows users to prove ownership of Bitcoin without revealing their private key. How it works, you have a private key, secret, and a public key, shared. You use your private key to sign a transaction. Others use your public key to verify the signature. Example, when Alice sends BTC to Bob, she signs the transaction with her private key using ECDSA. Everyone can verify it's really from her, but no one can figure out her private key. Shower summary, SHA-256 creates secure fixed-length fingerprints of data. ECDSA proves ownership with digital signatures based on elliptic curves. Both work together to keep Bitcoin secure, verifiable, and trustless.
Quantum computing will most likely affect the elliptic curve digital signature algorithm first. Whether you can use a quantum algorithm to shortcut SHA-256, I'm not sure about that. I don't know if there is a quantum algorithm for that or how easy it is. So that's a different class of algorithm, and it might require a different approach to cracking. But let's say that ECDSA is affected. Ironically, what that means is that if you lost your keys, but you had previously used that address, then a signature together with a public key will be visible and will be available on the blockchain. Because when you spend from an address, you leave behind a public key and a digital signature. Whereas Satoshi, for example, never spent, never moved any of the initial mined coins. So if, in fact, Satoshi had 1 million coins, and if those are sitting there on the blockchain, because they haven't been spent, we don't have a signature, and we don't have a public key. What we have is an address, and an address is the result of a double hash and is not the result of the ECDSA algorithm, which means that if a quantum computer can crack ECDSA, but it can't crack SHA-256, then Satoshi's coins are safe. The only coins that are affected are the ones where those addresses had been reused several times. It's one of the reasons why it's a best practice to only use an address once. The first time a signature appears on the blockchain is when those funds have already moved, they're empty, that address never gets used again, that key never gets used again. So even if the public key can be cracked in the future, it results in a private key that doesn't control any funds because you only use it once. Ironically, that means that people who don't follow that best practice may have their keys affected by quantum computing long before people who do use that practice, and Satoshi, whose 1 million coins never got moved and therefore never had signatures attached to them.
Hash UTXOs do not always directly contain public keys. They usually contain a locking script pub key, that defines the conditions to spend them, which often includes a public key hash. Here's what that means. UTXO, unspent transaction output, it's an output from a previous Bitcoin transaction that has not yet been spent. Each UTXO has a script that says, here's how you can spend me. Most common type, P2PKH, pay to public key hash. The UXO contains a hash of the recipient's public key, not the full public key itself. To spend it, the spender must provide a public key that matches the hash, a valid signature from the corresponding private key.
Quantum computing doesn't necessarily mean immediately that all coins are vulnerable. It's only the case for those where perhaps the digital signature is visible on the blockchain. Now, if SHA is vulnerable, but ECDSA isn't vulnerable, then you can take the address and reverse it to a public key, perhaps. That would require very big vulnerability in SHA. That's not simply finding a collision. That's reversing a hash algorithm, which is a whole different class of problem. And in that case, you would still have to figure out from the public key that you have as a result what the private key is. So you'd have to break both SHA-256 and ECDSA to move funds that have never been, from an address that has never been reused or spent.
Simple explanation of how quantum computing could affect Bitcoin by making it possible to derive a private key from a public key, something that's nearly impossible with classical computers. 1. In classical cryptography today, Bitcoin uses elliptic curve cryptography, ECC. It's a one-way function. Private key, public key is easy. Public key, private key is computationally infeasible with classical computers. Enter quantum computing. Quantum computers use qubits, which can be in multiple states at once, giving them unique power for certain problems. They can run an algorithm called Shor's algorithm, designed to break ECC and RSA by efficiently solving the discrete logarithm problem, the hard math problem behind ECC. This means, given a public key, a quantum computer running Shor's algorithm could figure out the private key quickly, in minutes or hours, depending on the power of the quantum computer. Hash 3. Why this matters for Bitcoin. If someone sees your public key, e.g., after you make a transaction, a powerful enough quantum computer could eventually compute your private key. They could then steal your Bitcoin by making unauthorized transactions.
So it's not as simple. But the bottom line is that if quantum computing becomes a problem, yes, we will need to move funds to a new type of address that uses a digital signature algorithm or something like that that is quantum secure.